What would you do if your husband called you in the middle of a business trip and said, "I emptied our joint account, filed for divorce, and I'm starting over with my assistant"? Then laughed? Would you hang up? Would you cry? Or would you say, "Okay," because that's exactly what I did. My name is Naomi Carter. I'm 34 years old. And until 3 days ago, I thought I had a normal marriage with my husband, Ethan Carter, who is 38. 10 years together. 8 of those married. We had what people call a stable life. A 4-bedroom home in Brookfield Estates. 2 paid-off cars. A joint savings account with just over $186,000 in it. And a 5-year plan that included investment properties, early retirement, and, maybe, finally, kids. Ethan handled most of the financial decisions because he was a real estate consultant. Numbers were his thing. Investments were his language. Risk analysis was literally how he made a living. So when he called me that Tuesday afternoon while I was sitting inside a supplier conference room in Chicago, I assumed he was checking in about something normal. Groceries. The dog. The electricity bill. Not this. The call lasted 47 seconds. 47 seconds was all it took for him to tell me he had already transferred every dollar from our joint account into a separate one, filed for divorce that morning, and booked a one-way flight to Miami with Lily, his 24-year-old assistant. And then he said something that didn't feel important at the time. "Enjoy begging your family when the bills hit." And laughed. Actually laughed. Now let me ask you something. Why would someone be that confident? Why would someone burn down a 10-year marriage in under a minute unless they were absolutely certain there was nothing you could do about it? I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't even ask him why. Because in that exact moment, something clicked. A memory. A document. Something Ethan had insisted we both sign 8 months earlier for what he called tax efficiency. So instead of giving him the reaction he wanted, I paused and calmly said, "Okay." Then I ended the call. And when I walked back into our house 3 days later, Ethan wasn't laughing anymore. His confidence disappeared the moment he realized what I hadn't told him on that phone call. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Why would someone destroy a 10-year marriage with a single phone call? Unless they were absolutely sure they had already won? That was the part that bothered me during the flight back home. Not the betrayal. Not even the fact that Ethan had admitted to running off with Lily like it was some kind of office romance fantasy. It was the confidence. Because people don't laugh like that unless they believe they've removed every possible consequence. And Ethan thought he had. For the past 6 months, he had been slowly moving money out of our joint savings account in small, unnoticeable amounts. 4,000 here. 6,000 there. Always with a logical explanation. Temporary holding for a property tax adjustment. Liquidity for a short-term closing. Escrow buffer for a client deal. And I believed him. After all, this was the man who handled our investments, filed our taxes, negotiated our mortgage rates, and once spent 3 weeks explaining to me why refinancing at a 0.25% difference could save us $22,000 over time. So I didn't question him when I saw those transfers. I trusted him. Which is exactly what he was counting on. 2 days before that call, he made the final move. $142,000. Gone overnight. And the remaining balance? Withdrawn in cash the following morning. All while I was boarding a flight to Chicago. Now here's the question you should be asking. How does someone move that much money without triggering suspicion from the bank or their spouse? The answer is simple. You don't. Unless the paperwork already says you're allowed to. 8 months earlier, Ethan had convinced me to restructure our financial authorization for what he called tax efficiency. A revised joint asset agreement. He said it would make it easier for us to qualify for investment loans in the future. So I signed it. Without reading page 6. And page 6 changed everything. But not in the way Ethan thought. Because when I got home, I didn't check the bedroom first. I checked the mail. And what I found inside explained exactly why he had sounded so confident on that call. Have you ever signed something thinking it protected your marriage, only to realize later it protected you from it? That envelope in the mail wasn't random. It was from our bank's compliance department. And banks don't send compliance letters for normal activity. My hands didn't shake when I opened it. That surprised me. Maybe because deep down, I already sensed this wasn't going to end the way Ethan imagined. The letter stated that an internal review had been triggered due to unusual withdrawal behavior and cross-state asset transfers. Specifically, the movement of six-figure funds into an account not previously linked to our shared financial profile. Translation? Ethan hadn't just moved the money. He had moved it into Lily's personal account. Not a joint transition account. Not a business holding account. Her account. And that changed everything. 8 months earlier, when Ethan hired Marcus Levin, a 52-year-old financial consultant, to optimize our joint investments, there was one small clause I insisted on adding after Marcus casually mentioned liability exposure in administrator-led transfers. Clause 14b. It sounded boring, technical, forgettable, but it read clearly. The designated primary financial administrator would assume full personal liability for any transactional losses or unauthorized third-party reallocations. Ethan volunteered to be the primary administrator. He even joked about it. "I'll take the boring responsibility stuff," he said. And I let him. Because at the time, responsibility sounded like protection. Now ask yourself something. If you're the primary administrator, and you transfer joint funds into your girlfriend's personal account without documented spousal consent, what does that look like to a bank's fraud division? It looks like unauthorized asset diversion. Which means the bank freezes accounts first and asks questions second. By the time I finished reading that letter, 3 things had already happened without Ethan knowing. The joint account was locked. An audit was opened. And every account tied to Ethan's administrator ID was flagged for review, including his personal savings. But Ethan didn't know that yet. He was probably boarding his Miami flight, smiling, thinking he'd just pulled off the cleanest exit in history. He didn't realize his debit card was about to teach him a lesson in consequences. And he definitely didn't expect what would happen when he tried to use it for the first time. What happens when the person who thought they took everything suddenly can't access anything? Ethan found out the hard way. 2 hours after landing in Miami, he and Lily walked into a waterfront restaurant. New city, new life, new beginning. He ordered confidently. Steak, wine, celebration energy. He slid his debit card across the table like a man who had just reinvented himself. Declined. He laughed it off. Must be fraud protection. Big transfer earlier. Tried again. Declined. Now let me ask you something. How fast does confidence evaporate when the system you thought you controlled suddenly locks you out? Because by the time he stepped outside to call his bank, the automated message had already changed. Your account is temporarily restricted pending review. Restricted. Not delayed. Not processing. Restricted. And here's the twist. It wasn't just the joint account. The compliance review had flagged every account tied to his administrator credentials. His personal savings. His investment portfolio. Even the escrow deposit he had wired for a Miami condo was now under provisional hold. He called me that night. No laughter this time. No smug tone. Just confusion trying to disguise panic. "What did you do?" he asked. Notice the wording. Not "what happened?" What did you do? Because in his mind, this had to be my revenge. But I hadn't touched a thing. I simply read the letter. Then I called our attorney, Rachel Dunn, 45 years old, sharp, methodical, calm. I asked one question. If a primary administrator violates Clause 14b, do I qualify for emergency asset protection? She didn't hesitate. You already qualify. Which is why, 4 days later, when Ethan showed up at the house to collect what he called the rest of his things, his key didn't work. The garage code failed. And his access to the security system had been legally revoked. He stood on the porch holding a suitcase. Locked out of the house. Locked out of his money. Locked out of the life he thought he had already escaped. And that's when he called again. But this time, he wasn't asking questions. He was begging. And I still hadn't told him the worst part. Remember when Ethan said, "Enjoy begging your family when the bills hit?" He really believed I would be the one panicking. The one locked out. The one scrambling to explain why the mortgage hadn't been paid. But within 2 weeks of that 47-second phone call, everything he thought he had secured started collapsing in slow motion. The bank's audit didn't just stay internal. Because the moment Lily's personal account received six-figure funds tied to a joint marital account without dual authorization, her financial advisor told her to close it immediately. Which she did. Meaning the money Ethan had moved was no longer sitting safely in some romantic, fresh start fund. It was now part of an active liability investigation. His attempted condo purchase in Miami? Denied after the escrow hold triggered a transactional review. His personal credit lines? Frozen pending compliance clearance. And then came the part he never planned for. His employer launched an internal ethics inquiry after being notified of a possible financial misconduct case tied to off-book asset diversion. Now ask yourself, how do you explain to your workplace that you transferred joint marital funds into your assistant's personal account while preparing to leave your spouse? Ethan called every day after that. Voicemails. Apologies. Promises. At one point he even said, "We can fix this together." Together. From the same man who laughed and told me to beg my family. But the calmest thing I ever said to him was still that one word on the phone. Okay. Because sometimes the loudest reaction isn't anger. It's silence. Sometimes the most dangerous response to betrayal is letting someone believe they've already won, while the consequences are quietly catching up behind them. So if you've ever trusted someone with your future, subscribe. Because next time, the person laughing might not be the one who wins.